This show is taped at La Cenne, a space for creation and collaboration. Artists, thinkers, and creators of all stripes tell us what inspires their work, a starting point that takes us into their creative process in their own words. Welcome to Who Inspires You. Fraser is an actor, a director, and a puppeteer. Zach received actor training at Dalhousie University and at l'École Philippe Gaulier. He specialized in puppetry training at UQAM. He has directed or acted in more than a dozen theater productions and just recently won a Montreal English Theatre Award for his puppetry design work. Zach is also a movement and mask teacher at John Abbott College. Zach, hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Miriam.
So let me just ask you right off the bat, who inspires you?
Well, when I first thought about this, I have to say that it would be, as a whole, the Quebec puppetry community and the world of puppetry. I'm someone who comes from the world of theater. I'm more of an actor-director in what I'd call a straight-up traditional theater production, but more and more in recent years, I find I'm always drawing on the world of puppetry. And in Quebec specifically, and more throughout Canada, there's a really vibrant puppet community that brings a lot of extra oomph to the work that we can do in theater.
And is the puppet community very tied to the traditional theater community in Montreal?
It's funny because I always feel like for theater in Montreal, there's three communities. There's the Anglo community, there's the Francophone community, and then there's the puppetry community. And so I will work with my Anglophone friends on certain projects, and then I don't work so much in the Francophone traditional theater at the moment, but then I find I'm working with different people when I'm working on the puppetry, and it is a community all of its own. Yeah. One of the things that I'm constantly trying to do is to have more crossover between those communities.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
So we associate puppetry with children's theater, right? But you don't do children's theater.
No, and I do, but I don't. I'm not anti-children's theater. I'm performing in a few kids shows right now, and I have in the past. But I think it's important for us to remember that puppetry doesn't just benefit children's theater. And so, yes, a lot of my projects recently, they're definitely adult pieces of theater that incorporate puppets. And I think it's important that we see the potential in that. And I'd like to see more theaters drawing on puppetry to enhance what they can do on stage.
Why do you think that we have this idea that puppets is not for adults?
I mean, we've all experienced them as kids, and it's an easy place to go. It's naive. Puppets and dolls are kind of the same thing. It's just that they have mechanics in them or strings that are attached to help us make them move better. So they are dolls. So in a way, one of the things I do in my life is I play with dolls. But at the same time, and I think we like to think that they're cute and naive and they're innocent, and we think that it's going to be kids that can be drawn into the magic of puppetry, that we can trick kids into believing that they're alive somehow. But the fact is we can do that with adults as well. Adults, while we don't want to admit it, we're just as enraptured by puppets. And so whether an adult goes to see a children's theater show or not, I mean, animation in all its forms, it has a place for kids, but it can be just as compelling for adults. In a similar way, I think comic strips and the growth of graphic novels, and now we realize it's just a different medium that in a way it's simplistic, it's pictures, it's a lot of pictures, and somehow we think of that as being for kids and not for adults. But once you get into the art of the pictures or the art form of the puppetry, And then you can put it with any content you want, and then it can be just as compelling for all of us.
Yeah. So puppets, you said there's a naivete to them.
Yeah.
And maybe in a way that's what's magical about them, that they kind of touch us in our irrational mindset, and they can maybe, with adults, bring them to a place where we don't usually go.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's fun is when nowadays the trends in puppetry are that you're not concealing the puppeteer. The puppeteers are fully visible.
Yeah.
We're not trying to trick anyone. We are there, and yet it's like when you can do magic and you're exposing the magic, and yet the magic still lives, then that's an ultimate proof of its power, I think.
Yeah.
So I love it when an audience, when an adult can. It doesn't matter. The thing is the object. It's an animate object.
Yeah.
We know that it has no life.
Yeah.
And yet we want to give it life. So as the puppeteer, you're giving it life, but as the audience member as well, it only lives if you believe that it lives. And so there's something powerful in that theater space.
The suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, and we accept it. And you do, often in a puppet show, you can say, it's similar to perhaps Shakespeare. It takes 5 minutes to get used to hearing the Shakespeare. And it can be also 5 minutes of a puppet show. You might be really aware of the puppeteer. And then bit by bit, the puppeteer disappears, even though they're fully exposed.
Yeah.
And you stop looking at that, and you just buy into the world of the universe of the living puppet. So.
Yeah. Is there a subject matter that is, I guess, better able to be translated through puppetry?
There are a few areas that puppetry can really excel at, and I think it's important to remember, a lot of us who do work in puppetry, we don't only work in puppetry. Sometimes I do shows that have nothing to do with puppets. It's just actors, but there are times when it can bring an extra level of power. It can be poetic. It can be, first of all, it can be magical and mystical. You don't need to follow the rules of gravity. If you're making a puppet, if you're casting a puppet versus casting an actor, you really design it from the get-go to be what the essence of that character is. They can float, they can fly, they can die, they can be reborn, they can have their limbs pulled off, and then they can be put back together. There's a lot more elasticity in them than there is in a person. I find that often we think of them as being comic. If you think of Jim Henson's Muppets, and there's a humor, they're certainly capable of humor, and they can be absurd and ridiculous, but then they can also be poetic. And a lot of the pieces that I've worked with puppets in, we've done working on Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, working on a show, the Aeneid, based on a translation by Olivier Kemed, an adaptation of Olivier Kemed's and then translated into English, but dealing with the refugee experience, coming to a new land. It's a story similar to the Odyssey to some degree, but the Aeneid, it's a bit lesser known, but dealing with immigration and tragic stories, epic stories, pathos. They are capable of that. In a way, a puppet, it seems simple, it seems naive, it seems innocent and less threatening to us, that we open ourselves up to them often more than we might to an actor on stage. Yeah. If an actor was to go up on stage and weep, sometimes we receive that, it feels just like it's self-indulgent. But a puppet is able often to do that sort of thing, and we're drawn into them more. And because we're more open to them, they can actually reach us in a deeper place, I think.
And so you're a puppeteer, but you're also a puppet maker.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the craft of making puppets?
Yeah, again, I started as an actor, director, and then so became a puppeteer through my experiences. Earlier on, when I first finished in Nova Scotia my studies, I worked with a company called Mermaid Theatre, and I was really working on the aspect of being a puppeteer. And then when I went to UQAM, they have a specialized puppetry program, and I like that they actually called it. It's DSS. It's a special. It's like an advanced diploma specialized in contemporary puppetry, and they specifically call it contemporary puppetry because yes, they want us to know the traditions of the various forms that have lived through the eras, but they also want us to be reinventing it as we go and trying to find new styles. There's a good emphasis in that program on design, and so it's been fun for us to really, the aesthetic that you play with it becomes central to each project. And when I'm working on different projects, I do have my style, but project to project, there's an aesthetic that goes with each one. So on one level, you're designing the mechanics required for the show, but on another level, you're designing the aesthetic, sort of what's going on inside and how does it move, but also how does it look, because again, that's where I think it's fun that it becomes it's a coming together of the live performance. It's live performance and fine arts, or the performing arts and the fine arts.
Yeah.
And so there's an aspect that's artisanal, sculptural. You find some designers, fine artists that find their way toward puppetry, or performance artists that find their way toward puppetry.
Okay. And what materials do you work with? You said you have your own personal style. Does that include using certain materials?
Yeah, I think it does. There's a little bit of the spirit of a puppeteer. Often they're a little bit of a jack of all trades. They do a little bit of all the different styles, and I came into it again with less of the design experience. So in a way, I get a bit intimidated by sophisticated modern chemical products, whereas natural products, organic products, I end up using more, to some degree, working with something like papier-mâché, but then I work a lot lately. I've been working with yarn and string for the exterior quality. The last project this summer, we were working, it was Shakespeare in a park, and we were using, and because of the subject matter, we ended up using bones. And
actual bones?
Actual bones and
human
sticks.
Bones?
No, not human bones. No, I had to visit the local butcher often and get like hip bones and various bones that then went into the faces, mixed with yarn, string, branches from the park. So their limbs were wood, but it sounds bizarre. But trust me,
it sounds
I think
great. Actually,
they were all in different places, but. There was another piece that I worked with where we were looking for a much lighter, more childlike quality to it, and so I don't know if you know those big foam, like squares that you can piece together like puzzle pieces for kids on the. They're
like mats. For
the
ground.
And so often they're like yellow and red and blue and green, and so I took those and we were making giant puppets, and so I chopped all those things up and they became sculptural pieces that went together. So it depends on the project, but that's one of the aspects that's really fun, because again, you don't have as much freedom with an actor to do that. Yes, you could have something like Cirque du Soleil where it's really a lot of costume and makeup.
Yeah.
But even just to say, does this character even need to have hands? Does this character need to have a body? Is this character, how abstract or absurd is this character? You can stretch the boundaries a lot more, and it brings back to theater a lot of sense of play and theatricality.
Maybe we could just talk about your work as a teacher, a movement and mask teacher. What does that entail?
I've been teaching at Abbott in various places, I guess, for several years now, and for me, it's really the other half of what I do. It actually energizes me in my professional work outside the schools. I teach movement for actors, which isn't dance, it's not sports, but it's somewhere between the two. It's understanding the vocabulary of movement. And so now I do incorporate, whether it be puppetry specifically or mask work or just movement for the actor, it's all about understanding the language of the body and how, understanding how we communicate things with our body. And when you're wearing a mask or manipulating a puppet, you as the performer can step outside a little bit to see, to understand you go to the essential movements, you go to the essence of the movement, and every little nuance on stage communicates something, and we communicate a lot without realizing it. So it's both being able to sculpt, to sort of control that, or to make choices in what you're communicating, and to play with dynamics, rhythm. I always think that actors need to be, I wish all actors were capable of the qualities that a dancer has and the qualities that an athlete has
Yeah.
as well, to be able to create a style of theater that is vibrant and alive and in the body and in the visuals, not just in the words.
And that requires mastering like your own movement
Yeah.
in minute detail. I
Yeah,
imagine.
I love the fascination that the study of animal work and the study of behavior of people. Just on a bus, you see all the different rhythms that people have. It communicates a lot. And as actors, that's part of our job, to be able to suck that in and to absorb that, and then to let that inspire characters.
And it would make sense that your knowledge of puppetry really bleeds into.
I think they
your
really go
acting.
hand in hand. I think puppets are really good teachers for actors. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you for being with us, Zach.
Thank you. Thanks, Miriam.